it is 100% inevitable when reviewing a game like Tormented Souls that major comparisons to both Silent Hill and Resident Evil will rear their ugly, mutated heads. And typically, I'd try to resist the urge to hold each of Tormented Souls' features against those classics. But when it comes to survival horror, it almost feels like the developers of such games are begging you to match their game up against the all-time greats. So, since that's what Dual Effect seem to want, let's dive into the unsettling horror of Tormented Souls and see if it can hold a candle to survival horror's finest. I didn't really get the greatest first impression when starting Tormented Souls. The inciting incident and initial build-up just seemed kinda piss poor. Like a lot of other bargain basement horror games, it starts with our protagonist receiving a letter, then your head kinda hurts a bit, and moments later you've already arrived in a mysterious, spooky place. So basically, Silent Hill Light. Then all of a sudden, you're hit in the back of the head, wake up naked in a bath with a tube stuck down your throat and one of your eyes missing. It's somehow a perfect balance between subtle and painfully on the nose, which is what I think Tormented Souls truly excels at. Take the first enemy reveal, for example. Introducing the monsters has always been a hugely significant part of any survival horror. And when considering that, Tormented Souls' creature reveal could be described as a bit weak. You walk into a hallway and boom, there's a monster now. It's by no means subtle. However, that doesn't mean the initial encounter wasn't nerve-wracking. By this point, I already knew TS was going to follow the same tried and tested save point system as classic Resi. We will get into that a little bit later. So I knew that death would likely have some consequences. What I didn't know though was how to tell if a creature was actually dead or not. And that lack of knowledge I had going into this fight made the option to run away like a coward much more tantalizing, which is a feeling that stayed present throughout most of the game. And it's all down to the devs' fantastic understanding and use of fixed camera angles. On the occasions when the game shows said masterful competency in building tension, it primarily came in the form of impeccable sound design. Hearing an enemy before you see it, mixed with the excellently positioned fixed camera, provided so much more fear and adrenaline than anything the simplistic combat ever could. Of course, with all games of this variety, there are some issues that arise from those camera angles. Spatial awareness during combat and the ability to correctly move are often entirely thrown out of the window. Obviously, the best solution to that is to avoid any conflict. But the tight corners and corridors of the hospital don't fully allow for ease of maneuverability around the attacking monsters. Being fair though, that isn't just an issue that Tormented Souls struggles with. Horror gamers have wrestled for decades with shoddy framing and piss-poor character movement. It's why Resident Evil 4 was able to be such a hit with mass audiences and the reason the RE remakes followed suit. And that's not to say homages like this shouldn't exist. I love it when games try to emulate the nostalgic classics. It is, however, a completely honest criticism of most titles in the subgenre, including and especially this one. Also, why is this game got that little mouse click icon on the main menu? Like, what maniac even wants that? The interactive menu in general is something I find a smidge baffling. I do think TS's examining elements are a great way of building off of survival horror's obsession with closely examining random trinkets and keys.
Oh, be careful what you wish for.
By simply letting me select a tool and find the correct spot to use it, I all of a sudden feel much more integrated into the horror. Games like RE and Silent Hill have had this examine feature for decades now, but barely ever make use of it. So I'm glad to see a survival horror game finally try to fully utilize them. It does maybe take it a bit too far though, by getting a little too pedantic for its own good. Take this wrench, for example. Why do I need to keep opening my inventory to guess how wide open this wrench needs to be? I used the wrench, so just use the goddamn wrench! That's not my only issue with Tormented Souls' application of survival horror tropes. I get that it's inspired by the old style survival horrors, but in this day and age, incorporating a severely punishing checkpoint system is not a fun gimmick. Especially when you choose to include stilted combat, barely any health items, and painfully long distances between save points. Even those classic Resident Evil titles presented plenty of ink ribbons and save points on top of regular doses of green herbs and ammo. And just like those Resident Evil games, it does sometimes just devolve into randomly running around rooms, tapping the A button, hoping that you'll stumble onto some secret that'll help progress the story. Although in Tormented Souls' case, sometimes the solution is utter fucking stupidity, and it should have really been better signposted. I know a lot of people can get strangely gatekeepy over this sort of stuff, but if you gotta use a walkthrough to enjoy this, use a bloody walkthrough. It ain't worth the wasted time. For me, these games are at their best when exploring a new area or naturally finding new ways to progress, not running around desperately spamming the A button like a twat. Thankfully, I didn't find myself doing that too often, and I was able to engross myself in Tormented Souls' heavy atmosphere and gnarly imagery. Honestly, it can get kind of unpleasant at times, but all in that terribly good kind of way that few horror games seem to understand. I'm not sure there was a great need to show her boobs in the first 3 minutes of the game, but I guess you gotta keep people hooked somehow, eh? To go into any deeper detail would risk spoiling the parts of this game that make it stand out above all the other thrown together survival horror crap that gets squirted out into the market these days. Tormented Souls definitely stands out above the rest in terms of quality, but your enjoyment of it is really going to come down to how much you appreciate old school survival horror games like Silent Hill and Resident Evil, because this is a warts and all type love letter to the genre. There are certain aspects that can feel outdated, but for some, those aspects are what will bring the nostalgic joy a lot of players might be looking for. Personally, I had a blast with it, and I'd more than welcome more of it in the future. But now I want to know if you're interested in Tormented Souls, or if you've already played it and are just here to listen to someone else's thoughts. Please do feel free to let us know any and all of your thoughts down in the comments. And if you want to support the channel even more than you already have, we'd love if you left a like or even subscribe for more like this. Plus, if you wanted to financially support new content, the link to our Patreon is in the description. We appreciate all of your support in whatever form it takes. Thank you again for watching, and cheers.